Hello, guests. I mean, hello, everyone. Welcome back to Aetheral Space.
What the fuck was that?
Goodbye,
Hotel
guests.
Honey? Hello, guests.
I was looking at the title. Hello, guests. Welcome to Hotel San Noir.
Jesus Lord. Alright, well, welcome back, guys.
These are the Tanhoney Bellboys. They all take things from you.
They don't give them back. They don't arrive at your room.
You better hold on to your name.
I love the idea of, like, bellboy's like, allow me to get your bag, sir, and then just walks out of the building. Leaves. Yeah. That's his now.
The light flies.
You go, hey, what are you doing? You said, they're like, I said, allow me, and you said yes.
It's like the fucking Fae. It's like, you gave me permission.
Therefore, it's only natural.
May I
that
take
I would
things
take.
from you? Of course.
Oh my god.
Oh, thank you, I'll have that face.
Do not go to Fae Hotel. Anyway, let's proceed, shall we?
Yeah, absolutely. Proceed. Please pay.
Okay. Many years ago. Hello? Called out Lucien Rarone. Or is it Rarone?
Rarone.
Lucien Rarone. Is anyone still alive? He'd crawled out of the wreckage of his troop carrier, his helmet nearly smashed, blood pouring down from his forehead onto and into his eyes. He still clutched his rifle in his hands, but he doubted it still worked after that impact. If worst came to worst, he could use it as a bludgeon. Better than nothing. The landscape had been decimated by the 3-minute battle. The carcass of a war groom lay draped over the city ruins, the sheer weight of the mechanoid crushing everything beneath it without exception. When they'd brought it down, someone sniping the Warbride out of the pilot's seat, it had seemed a victory for a moment before it had fallen. Lucien dragged himself across the battlefield, one of his legs refusing to obey him. What did they do now? Who was in charge? He'd seen the commander's head melt away from one of the Wargroom's attacks. Was he in charge now? The chain of command was just links scattered on the floor. Hello, he called out again. Did anyone else make it? His voice was quieter this time, more hoarse. He'd breathed something in back during the battle, and he knew it was playing havoc with his insides. He needed to get back to base soon. He needed medical attention. Panic crawled down the base of his skull. If he came back alone, his merit score would definitely be too low to qualify for medical aid. Oh my god, this is like a fucking Doctor Who episode. He needed to return with at least something to show for their efforts. Hello! Please! Teradel V was an unfortunate planet. Or is it Teradel 5?
Teradel 5.
Teradel 5 was an unfortunate planet. There had been a bureaucratic error when this region of space had been liberated from the UAP, and so it had ended up being placed in the custody of 2 separate ministers. Ministers who hated each other. So, while those 2 argued and insulted each other in the halls of the body, their conscripted armies slaughtered each other on the fields of Teradel, seeking total control of the planet. If you believe the rumors, they used this war to test new weaponry as well. Lucien coughed. Right now, he believed the rumors. Please! He screamed into the night's smog. Anyone! Yeah. Lucien whirled around at the sudden reply from behind him, raising his rifle defensively, his eyes wide with alarm. As a reflex, his finger pulled the trigger. But the barrel of the gun spat only sparks. As he thought, it had been damaged beyond repair. Panting for breath, he flipped it over in his hands, ready to use it as a club. Jace, what's your problem? Said a voice from within the fog. You're the one who was shouting for people. Who are you? Lucien demanded, animal adrenaline pushing him into action once more. The newcomer pushed his way out of the smoke, striding through the corpses of the mud. It was a young man, probably only a year or so older than Lucien. So 16 or thereabouts. Jesus Christ! What is Aetheral Space? Okay, this is not Skipper. I thought this would be Skipper.
Think that supremacy is not based.
This is the UAP.
No, it's liberated from the UAP.
Oh. With short purple hair and a tattered yellow scarf.
You can tell how things have improved.
What should this guy's voice be, since he's not Skipper?
Maybe it's more like this.
Maybe it's more like this. Okay. He smiled cheerfully at the soldiers, their eyes met. He wasn't wearing a uniform, not from either side. A civilian? No. A deserter? Lucien took a cautious step back, still ready to swing his gun. I'm a little lost, the young man chuckled sheepishly, scratching the back of his head. This is a war or something, yeah? It's pretty crazy around here, huh? Who are you? Lucien repeated. Hey, mind if I ask you something? The young man said, ignoring Lucien's question once again. You got any cigarettes? I've never smoked before, so I'm kind of curious to see what it's like. You tell me who you are, Lucien said steadily, or I won't be responsible for my actions. The young man said nothing to that. He just looked over, twitched a finger, and a nearly invisible string whipped through the air and snatched Lucien's rifle from his grip. He stumbled backwards, falling to the ground, suddenly disarmed. This was it. He was out of his league. Lucien raised his arms and squeezed his eyes shut, preparing for one of the miserable ends he'd seen so much of. But it didn't come. Slowly, Lucien dared to open his eyes. The young man was standing over him, frowning. "You're a twitchy little guy, aren't you?" he sighed, extending a hand. "Come on, get up." "Oh, never mind, I know who this is." "You're a twitchy little guy, aren't you?" he sighed, extending a hand. "Come on, get up." Sparks of rainbow-colored light drifted down his fingers, and Lucien's heart dropped even further as he saw them. Aether! He was certainly, definitely, absolutely out of his league. "Who are you?" he asked one last time, throat as dry as the desert. "Me?" the young man said, considering it. "I'm... How about Wu Ming?" "Yeah, that sounds good. I'm Wu Ming." He grinned. "How about you?" "Ah," Black Dog grinned, its head and arm reforming from a black mist, its flickering eyes fixed on Morgan Noct. "Yes, I like this. I'm into this. Superb, wonderful, fantastic. You've got great timing, Morgan Noct. I was just about to wrap things up here." Morgan said nothing at first. He just drew his smoke sword back, eyes fixed on the Aether abomination, his breath trailing out of his mouth as cold mist. "Really?" The Black Dog cocked its head. "Nothing to say to the Black Dog. No banter. Come on, it's no fun without some dirty talk. Or maybe you're unsettled from having a perfect copy of your teacher before you?" At that, at least, Morgan reacted. "A perfect copy?" he scoffed. "Hardly. The eyes are way too big." "That's just so I can see you better, little man," Black Dog smirked. "Really, though, that was quite the approach. I didn't even see you coming until your sword was already inside of me. If I had blood, I know it'd be pumping right now." Morgan looked past the Black Dog to where Wu Ming was sprawled on the ground. Blood oozed from the stumps of his legs, legs that terminated with torn thread, an absurd mixture of the material and the organic. To tell the truth, Wu Ming was impressed with his apprentice as well. The last he'd noticed Morgan's presence, the kid had still been on top of the shopping center, fighting the hive of Malkuth. What had changed? Why was he here now? Wu Ming looked and he saw the pale hue of Morgan's skin and the exhaustion in his unwilling breaths, the signs of a battle that was starting to grate. Wu Ming had never experienced that himself, but he knew what it looked like. So he'd come here to get Wu Ming's help. That made sense. "Sorry, Morgan," Wu Ming grinned from the ground, embarrassed. "It looks like I bit off a little more than I can chew. You should probably get out of here." Black Dog glanced back down at Wu Ming, the levity fading from its face. "You think I'll just let him get away?" it asked, voice low. Wu Ming glared right back at it, even through his smile. "You think I need legs to kick your ass?" The Black Dog opened its simulacrum of a mouth to reply, but Morgan chose that moment to move. Not away, as Wu Ming had hoped, but instead to attack. In an instant he was upon the Black Dog, smoke sword whipping through the air that it was only visible... Smoke sword whipping through the air so that it was only visible as a dancing smear of purple. Wounds opened up all across Black Dog's body, but no flesh, no blood. "Kid!" Wu Ming shouted, using strings to pull himself out of the dog's range. "Normal attacks won't work!" His warning nearly came too late. At the same time as Morgan leapt back, the Black Dog lunged, the wounds on its body snapping open. I lost my place, sorry. The wounds on its body snapping open like mouths, and tendrils poured forth from them in pursuit. They were tipped with snarling canine heads, eyes white with malice, and they stretched to cover nearly the entire alley as Morgan continued to retreat backwards. They snapped and snarled, tearing apart the walls and floor as they went, their attacks indiscriminate. "ACB!" Morgan shouted, his voice tinged with the echo of Aether. Purple Aether coalesced near his foot, and as it did, he spun and kicked at it, sending the block he'd manifested hurtling towards the Black Dog. Wu Ming saw what he'd done. He'd applied an amplified cut effect to the block, effectively turning it into a 12-sided blade. Against anyone else that would have been a good maneuver, but against this thing... As the tendrils retracted back into its body, the Black Dog simply reached out and tapped the incoming block with a finger. It popped, and blood sprayed over the walls in the Black Dog's sly grin. Licking its lips, it spread its arms wide as if to display to Morgan that its wounds had now fully vanished. A malicious chuckle danced through the dark space. throughout the dark space. "I guess you haven't been watching that long," it said smugly, "but I've pretty much figured out aether constructs of that level. You can blame this guy for that." It makes the next shot. "I've already developed an ability to nullify any constructs an enemy throws at me." Yep, Wu Ming had really messed up this time. To tell the truth, he was probably the worst possible person to have fought this thing. After just a few minutes of contact with him, the threat the Black Dog presented had snowballed to such a level that Wu Ming was no longer sure he could even win. Did that mean he regretted it? Wu Ming grinned. "Oh, hell no! Puppet Lord, Starlight Swing!" In an instant, he activated 2 abilities. Puppet Lord created strings pulling on his shoulders, holding him up in the air and letting him move around. As he rose into his floating position, he let loose a web of light strings from his fingers, intending to cover the entire alleyway and catch Black Dog in a deadly net. His adversary had been ready for him, though. Black Dog responded at the same time as Wu Ming attacked. In the blink of an eye, it had turned and kicked off the wall, launching itself towards Wu Ming with a wild look in its eyes. Its form was fluid, and so it simply compressed itself to fit through the net as it closed the distance. As the strings finally reached their destination, the Black Dog was already in Wu Ming's face, its massive hand wrapped around his throat. "Sorry," it giggled, saliva running from its mouth. "Did you think I'd forgotten about you?" "Nah," Wu Ming gasped back. "I was counting on it. Sinking feeling!" The Black Dog's eyes widened, and it was no surprise, for its hands had started to sink into Wu Ming's throat where they made contact. It tried to pull away, but sinking feeling couldn't be escaped that easily. Black Dog realized that quickly enough, too. With a gruesome crunch, it dislocated its jaw, lunging forward to try and bite Wu Ming's head right off instead. Except, he had already created an opening. As the 2 of them flew through the air, Morgan leapt up behind Black Dog, another block clutched in his hands. Was he seriously trying the same thing again after seeing how it had ended up? No, he wasn't that stupid. With a roar of exertion, he hurled the block right at the Black Dog's face. "L.A.!" And this time, the projectile exploded into light and noise before it could make contact. Black Dog hissed in agony, retracting its head into its body to avoid the explosion. Seeing that there was now a danger of actual injury, it moved instantly to free itself. Sinking feeling was indeed too difficult, so that should be 2 O's. Too difficult to escape, so Black Dog just tore its own hands off at the wrists and let Wu Ming keep them. Kicking off his chest with enough force to vaporize ribs, it launched itself up into the air. Morgan followed. With a flick of his wrist, he launched a rope of fog and wrapped it around the creature's leg like a lasso. As it soared upwards, it pulled him right along with it. Wu Ming took a second to finally release sinking feeling, letting Black Dog's severed hands finally drop to the ground and dissipate into mist. He'd be best off getting into a good position now, but looking up at the shrinking figures of his apprentice and his copycat, he couldn't help but smirk to himself. It had been a while since he'd seen Morgan in person. But the kid really had gotten quick, huh? "String theory! Wormhole!" Black Dog glanced down at its massive leap, as its massive leap finally crested the building. It hadn't noticed at first, but it seemed it had acquired a passenger. Morgan Noct was clinging to its leg via one of those smoke ropes of his. How curious. Why hadn't Black Dog's ability automatically nullified that construct? It certainly fit the criteria. Morgan Noct. Black Dog sifted through the information it had acquired from Wu Ming. This kid was his apprentice, one of the 7 blades of the turning of the air. He used abilities based on the... What'd you say?
That's out of date, Black Dog.
Oh no. He used abilities based on the alphabet. The data it had acquired was fairly clear on the first few letters, but it got murkier the further it went. That was annoying. Maybe it should have let Wu Ming beat it up a little more to acquire more intelligence? Nah, it might have been strategically advantageous, but the idea of willingly losing a fight still struck Black Dog as a real 0 out of 10 scenario. It would just kill Noct and figure all this out later. The nullification worked just as well manually, after all. As it landed on the roof, the Black Dog swung its leg with almighty force, whipping Noct through the air horizontally. Then, at the right moment, just the right moment, it nullified the smoke rope. The construct popped into blood, and Noct went flying into the wall. Debris and smoke went flying in every direction as he slammed into the concrete surface. Sorry, 1 second. Black Dog smiled, regenerating its hands to cup its ears. Was that the sound of breaking bones I heard? Ah, what a wonderful melody. I'll give you a 10 out of 10 for your entertainment value, if nothing else. I'm imagining that scene in JoJo Part 2, where, like,
exactly,
cuts
yeah.
off JoJo's arm. He goes, it's like,
Yeah, that's exactly what he's doing.
The smile widened into a sickly grin. Encore! Black Dog opened its mouth wide, distending its jaw once again. But this time, instead of biting, it breathed. With the force of a starship engine, it sucked in the air around it voraciously, taking in so much that its head inflated to nearly 10 times its original size. At the point its facial features became cartoonish, it finally relented, and so it huffed, and it puffed, and it spat that invisible payload right back towards the injured Morgan Noct. It was like Black Dog was belching forth a hurricane. A vicious beam of air poured from its mouth towards the small figure of Noct, the breath so concentrated it was very nearly a solid object. The Black Dog's eyes widened and viciously as Noct, caught injured and dazed, was unable to guard, the beam slamming into him with all its force. How many seconds would he last? 2, 3? Perhaps he was dead already! 10 out of 10! 2 thumbs up! 5 stars! Would recommend! Yes! Die! Finally, the attack crawled to a close, and the Black Dog's head returned its normal size.
Not even once.
Returned to its normal size, indeed. Perhaps it had gone a little overboard. The skyscraper behind where Noct had been standing had been completely destroyed, as had the 5 behind that. It would be a miracle if a corpse still even existed among that rubble. Still, Black Dog scratched the back of its head sheepishly. It's probably best to make sure. It took a single step forward, and the building exploded beneath it. It was just as Morgan Noct had thought. Wu Ming hadn't known about inside yet. Hang on, I gotta blow my nose. I'm so sorry for this on recording.
What?
I know. Hang on. Sorry, guys.
It broke my heart to blow my nose on recording.
What'd you say?
It broke my heart to blow my nose on recording. What?
What?
Now I know it sounds bad.
Pew, pew, pew. When that thing, Black Dog, had used the air attack, Morgan hadn't been able to dodge immediately. He needed to use an amplified grade to weaken and partially block the attack, and even that had peeled away nearly all the skin from his hands. As soon as the winds had begun to weaken, he'd used inside to move into the room below. And from there, he'd gotten to work. Now that he'd gotten a little more used to it, he'd realized light was a potent combination with a number of his other abilities. To put it simply, light was the ability to convert his own aether constructs into an explosive flame. Combined with fog, it essentially gave him the power to sculpt his own bombs freely. An entire story filled with fog made quite the explosion. Morgan watched, resolute, as light and heat poured through the building, and he readied the sword of smoke as the scraps of the Black Dog dropped to the ground in front of him. Its legs had been burnt away by the shine of light, and it looked back at him with feral indignance. This would be a great way to tilt a pachinko machine just right. Oh, look, Morgan said, nodding to the beast's twitching stumps. I guess you were a perfect replica after all. As the Black Dog howled at him, Morgan tightened his grip against the hilt of his sword. This time, he promised the world, I'll show you what I can do. He went to dart in, but fortunately the light shifted far above, and Morgan saw the trap he would have stepped into. Immediately he jumped backwards, creating a platform of amplified fog beneath his feet to stop himself from touching the floor. After all, it was now the enemy's domain. In the darkness of the ravaged building, the Black Dog had thrust its hands against the floor, and those hands had reformed into bundles of black strings, spreading all throughout the area like the roots of a diseased tree. The Black Dog's grin stretched all the way up its neck as it looked up at Morgan. Like this, right? It breathed. The roots spread further, crawling towards the gaggles of rats that lurked in the shadows of this abandoned place. Animal instinct showed them the danger they were in instantly. They squeaked and squealed as they went to escape, but even with their haste, they'd never stood a chance. The instant the roots made contact with their furry bodies, they vanished in pops of red aetheral sparks like bugs caught in a bug zapper. For a few seconds, as the horde of vermin was recorded all at once, the room itself shone crimson. And then, Guardian Entity! Black Dog cackled. Kyuso! Hark! The providence of a cerebrospinal heaven, the triumph of divine will over mortal soul, a sequence of light slaughtering the dark, the grace, the glory, the virtue, the memory, the wonder, an angel had come. Praetorian One floated over the world of man, wings spread wide, feathers floating all around him like the satellites of a celestial sphere. Even the individual feathers bore crimson eyes, though watchful over all below him, all was now below him. He needed not even flap his wings to fly. It was his nature to stand atop the sky. And yet... my back hurts! He bared his fingers like claws at the world. The wings that formed his head twisted around each other until they nearly formed a needle point. His feathers shuddered sympathetically in the air like subordinates outraged on his behalf. He could feel them shifting under his skin, the abilities that the Queen had granted him to save his life, an ecosystem of power that now formed his core. If he were to dig his claws into his chest and pull it open, no doubt a wellspring of divine light would pour forth. And yet this divinity was a fragile thing. He was the newborn of an uneasy equilibrium, one that had only just barely achieved existence, one that the world was pushing back against. In time, he would stabilize and achieve a true apotheosis, but right now, Samuel Seltzman! Because of you, my back hurts! He threw his wings out wide and vented his anger upon the world. Bolts of light fired forth from every inch of his body, bombarding the district below. And whatever those bolts struck crumbled into salt. Oh my god, Lot? I guess this is his lot in life. Buildings, vehicles, people, all of them were transmuted, turning the world into a pure and blinding white. Great clouds of steam floated up from the impact sites like a great breath of relief from the souls of the righteously departed. Returning to the serenity expected of Her Majesty's proxy, Praetorian One looked upon his work, and he thought it good. Did you die, Samuel Sunsman? No, you mustn't let that kill you. You have a more hellish punishment awaiting you. Right now, not even Praetorian One knew how Appointment would suffer before he died. All One knew was that he couldn't let the heathen get away with it, to humiliate an agent of Her Majesty, to murder an agent of Her Majesty, to sin. It could not be forgiven. When Praetorian One finally had Appointment in his hands, only then would the shape of agony reveal itself. Until then, all one needed to do was follow the mandate of heaven. Until then, all one needed do was to stop the rat from escaping its trap. The angel raised its arm and pointed a single thin finger up towards the sky. Deliver unto me a kingdom! His feathers moved to obey his command, pouring forth from his wings without end and hurtling up towards the sky. One by one they slotted together seamlessly, forming a radiant canopy over the entire district. Within the space of 30 seconds, the entire district was completely sealed in a red and white dome, bathed in a perpetual and soothing daylight. Now there was no escape. Not for the rat stripped of his metal skin, not for the rats seeking to flee this planet, not for any rats at all, none of them, before this night was done, all of them would have their filthy eyes burnt clean by Her Majesty's light. What a little freakazoid. This guy's a little fucking freak.
Angelism, not even once.
Lordy have mercy. What a little fucking freakazoid. I can't get over him.
There's so many freaks in this district right now.
Yeah, for real. When are we gonna get our first normal guy?
Would you say he's a normal guy in Aetheral Space, like, relatively?
Marcus Grace, that's it.
Yeah, that's his thing, though. That's what makes him a freak, is that he's normal.
What the hell? How have you still... Oh, maintained my sanity? I had to kill 10,000 people. That's my Aether contract. Oh man, Tan, have you ever watched Darker Than Black?
Darker Than Black? I have, yes.
It's peak. Anyway, we have questions of the aetheral nature.
I can't believe you would call an agent of Her Majesty a freak. To sin.
Rurum asks, what's up with the moon automatic the UAP has?
Spoilers.
Ainsworth asks, is Aether alive?
Well, in a sense, if you are alive and you pour your consciousness into your Aether, I guess your Aether is alive, in that sense.
Lan asks, at what point in reading the story would Winston figure out the mysteries of Aether? Like if he was reading our web serial.
I don't know. Well, he's obviously a detective guy who is smarter than me, the writer. So I'll tell you what I think he would have figured everything out mechanic-wise. Probably. I don't know.
I don't mean I mean mechanics, like the secrets of it, where it comes from, how it works.
I'd say around about 10, probably.
Whoa! So we have... You say
no, because you're not Winston. I'm not Winston, because he makes the bullshit leaps that a human cannot.
He would have read the name Lucifer Westmore and gone, it all makes sense.
He'd be going... I see.
Lucifer, you are that being.
So you, the reader, probably could not do that.
He wouldn't even read the chapter. He'd read the name Lucifer Westmore and he'd be like, no, I've solved it. That was the final piece.
Yeah, no, I as the right have to, bullshit away that he solved it from that.
Lan asks, will a person always be able to tell when they've unlocked Aether? Will it automatically feel different?
It will. You'll know when you've done it.
Can you, feel Aether when you use it? Does it have, a tactile sense?
Maybe like a buzz, yeah.
Like a little buzz. Lan asks, who would win in an eating contest? Anduin or Henry?
Anduin. Because he literally, everything he eats is basically recorded and dispelled.
Damn.
So
Fella's
he,
gotta
he is
eat.
not bound by like the rules of biology when he eats something. He can just keep going.
And Henry he was just that much of a freak.
But yeah, he's just a freak. He's just a big guy. He's a freak. And a cannibal.
God damn.
He was a bad man. He wasn't based.
Alright, well, I think that's it for our questions. We're all caught up. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.